So good morning, good evening, welcome everyone, and welcome to this latest iteration of the Indic Book Club Author Q&A. I am delighted today and especially excited because I think this is the first time we have not one but two authors. Both have written the same book, and the book is In the Footsteps of Rama, Travels with the Ramayana, and it's been written by Vikrant Pandey and Nilesh Kulkarni. And both of them I can tell you, let's talk a little bit about the authors before I get into the book and all. So Vikrant Pandey has translated 12 Marathi bestsellers into English, and his translation of Girish Kuber's book Tatayan the Tatas, How a Family Built a Business and a Nation, won the prestigious Gaj Capital Best Business Book Award in 2019. He's a graduate of IIM Bangalore, and I just learned 2 years back, he moved to being a full-time writer. So that's one reason that at least I am envious of. Nilesh Kulkarni is an entrepreneur who has been running his own company for over 35 years. He's a theater and voiceover artist with over 50 years of experience, an avid reader and traveler. He's also a poet, a cricket commentator, and a public speaking coach. He lives in Delhi with his artist wife. And again, I learned a very short while back that he's, even though he's, from his surname, you would have gathered he is a Maharashtrian, but he was born and brought up, to use a phrase, and has lived almost all his life in Delhi. So there is at least already some connection that I have with both of the authors in a very tenuous way. For those of you who have been following Vikrant's works and translations, and those of you who've been following the endeavors and initiatives of the Indic Book Club, you would have seen that we have been promoting and sending out copies of Vikrant's earlier books from Ranjit Desai's translation of Shivaji to Sambhaji to Duryodhan to our members. And when Vikrant reached out and said that he and Nilesh had co-authored a book, not a translation but a book, and that too in the footsteps of Rama, I was very, very excited to not only get a copy of the book, read it, but also have a chance to talk with the both of them. The book is how to put it. It is an ideal companion to have not only when you're reading the Ramayana, whether it is a Valmiki Ramayana, the Kamban Ramayana, the Goswami Tulsidas Ramcharitmanas, or any other version, but also if you happen to go to any of those places in India or even outside of India to Sri Lanka, for example, this is an ideal companion to have because it not only is a travelogue of sorts of the two authors as they went and they started their journey in Ayodhya and they ended back in Ayodhya. But it also intersperses this travelogue with small snippets and stories from the various versions of the Ramayana that tie in the story, the legend, what people generally associate with those places. So a very warm welcome to you both, Vikrant and Nilesh.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
So I'll start off with a very basic, obvious question. What was the inspiration for getting on this journey? How long did it take? And yes, let's start with that. And yes.
So, I was intrigued when I myself realized that the number of places which are mentioned in Ramayana, say Chitrakoot or Kishkinda or Panchavati, most people would not be able to point them on the map and say, this is where Chitrakoot is. Is it in MP or UP? That's a question people ask. They know somewhere it is in North India. Most people don't know that Kishkinda is what people know as Hampi. Hampi has become so popular World Heritage Site, but nobody remembers, nobody knows that Kishkinda is just next to Hampi. So that was the starting point when I bounced off this idea with Nilesh. And we both were very curious that this is something which has been in our consciousness for thousands of years. Somewhere we have forgotten the trail while we know the story, basic story of Ramayana. And that really started our curiosity. And we took our first step by going to Chitrakoot, and probably Nilesh can talk about how we actually decided to write the book.
Fascinating.
One
Nilesh.
comment on this, Avina, taking it forward from where you said it was a travelogue, and for just an odd beat, I found you kind of wavering between what to call it. So the right term for it, which was coined by Vikrant and me, is mytho travelogue. So that's the term we prefer to use for it. Of course, we strongly believe that the Ramayana is not a mythology thing. It is a itihas. It is actually something which has actually happened. But then this is the genre within which we have written the book, and we plan 2 more books of a similar category in the days to come. Probably you'll see them next year. Well, anyway, yes. And in addition to what Vikrant has said, we had also read Walking with Nanak. That is one book both of us had read and discussed with each other. And that time we had felt that some of the things in it were very sketchy. And for a major part, since it is a Pakistani writer writing, the travels of Nanak within India were not covered. So it's only in Pakistan, then there's a 16-year gap, and then again he comes back and it starts from there. That is the book which set off thinking that can we do this for an Indian icon? I mean, Nanak, of course, is a Sikh icon. We said, can we probably in an Indian icon again? But we thought, can we really take it forward in an icon who's known all over the world, all over the country? So we decided that we would probably write about Ram. And this book actually took shape because I and Vikrant have been friends for more than 30 years now. So we were sitting in a hotel room in Jaipur one time. We were holidaying together and the wife were out shopping. To drown the sorrow, we got talking. And he said, do you know where Chitrakoot is? So I said, like somewhere here. And that somewhere here probably covered about 1,000 square kilometers. So he said, Dekho, kisi ko bhi pata nahi hai. So shall we go there and find out what it's all about? That's where it started, this thing. And we went, this was in July 2018. And we went to Chitrakoot in September 2018. That was our first trip out for the book. And this traveling ended in January 2020 when we came back from Sri Lanka. So it took about an year or 5 months of traveling. Though of course, it was intermittent. We have other day jobs. So we would go out for a while, travel for 8-10 days, write out that portion, travel for another 10 days the next month, and so on. So overall, we visited about 53 places, 53 cities and towns. And must have traveled for about 150 days in these days, or 120 days at least, and kind of got over it. So that's how the book started.
Fascinating. I think that in itself would have been a journey. And so you said you started the journey from Chitrakoot because of this discussion that happened in Jaipur and wanted to take a look at it. But in your book, the journey actually begins from Ayodhya.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes.
And you also mentioned that contrary to what you had expected, there weren't too many people on the day that you visited Ayodhya, so you could get a longer darshan than just a passing one of Ramlala there. And then you also talk about the monkeys. Now, tell us a little bit about Ayodhya. How was the reality compared to the perception? What were the things that you were kind of looking forward to, anticipated, expected, or were wary of? And anything that you wanted to include, but for reasons of space or otherwise you couldn't include in your book?
So one point
Ayodhya, may I answer that? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm not taking anyone's name in particular, but it's to both of you.
I will talk about just one point about Ayodhya, Abhinav, and it was a pleasant surprise for us that we could do the Ramlala Darshan almost without any crowd. There was literally nobody there. We could stand there, but what happens is compared to the other darshan we had, let's say in Rameshwaram or many other temples, and I suspect that because over the last so many centuries, it had not been allowed to have the sort of rituals which are being practiced for hundreds of years in other temples. The sense of that power which you get in many other temples was probably missing, compounded with the fact that so much of security and all those barriers, which somehow prevents a devotee from really being able to have that experience which we really wanted to have. Compared to the Hanuman Gadi temple, which was an absolutely, or the banks of Sarayu at Faizabad near Ayodhya, was an absolutely marvelous experience. So that was one point I wanted to make before Nilesh continues.
Yeah, it's like when we went in, there were about 7 darshanarthis, including 4 of us. So there were only 3 others. There were about 100 policemen and roughly 500 monkeys. That was the proportion in which we were totally divided over the time. And the monkeys were so brazen that they would actually come and stand in front of you, put their hands in your pockets, take out whatever is in the pocket and walk away. And you couldn't do a thing because the policemen were laughing all along saying, "Ye to roz hota hai." They said, "Just stand there, don't move." So all the prasad that we had got for giving to the deity, it was all taken away by the monkeys within 10 steps of entering the premises. So I think major part of the Ramlala darshan was spent in looking left and right. Tu darshan kar, main bandaron ko dekhta hu, koi aata nahi raha hai. It was like that. But the feeling of awe that he is talking about, yes, we got it much more at Rajapur, for instance, in Tulsidas's house. This is one place where almost all 4 of us sat for a while. There was a Ramcharitmanas being recited in the background, and this had been recited non-stop for 12 generations. It's the 12th generation that was reciting it there. And we were sitting there, and believe you me, Abhinav, when we came out, all 4 adults were crying, actually tears flowing down and crying. There was such a strong connect at Rajapur, at the residence of Goswami Tulsidas, where he lived, at his house. So it was very there. And a strong connect in Ayodhya was at the Kanak Mahal. The Kanak Mahal is another beautifully maintained. It is the Rajas of, I think, Panna probably, who are maintaining it. And
correct. And you have a story. You have a story that you include in right at the very beginning of your book associated with Kanak Mahal also, right?
Yes. It's about Pragya Das. See, it is not directly related to the linearity of the Ramayana story, but the priest there told us that they were Ramnamis. They believed they were a sect which believes in service to Ram and Sita as a young couple. We said that whole temple is made in squares, and the innermost square is where there was a lawn, there was a garden, and in the center of the garden was where there was the jhula on which Ram and Sita sat as a couple, and then the sadhus would go and they would worship. So they considered themselves the descendants of the same servants. And I said, do you get darshan of Ramlala even now? He said, we don't have the purity of the heart. He says, what is required to have darshan here is only to have a pure heart. And he said the pure heart was the heart of Pragya Das. So he told us a story. Would you like me to give that to you in a small capsule?
Yes, please. I think that the story is was so moving that good you reminded that, because I was otherwise going to either ask you to read out that passage or ask you to tell it in your words. So please.
I'll summarize it. As it is by profession a storyteller, so it's easier for me to tell you than read out. So Pragya Das was a child somewhere near Ayodhya who didn't have a sister. And all the boys in the village would rape him mercilessly because he didn't have a sister. And particularly on Bhaiya Dooj or such occasions, they would say, look, my sister has come. She has got this for me. She's got that for me. And how come you don't have any sister? His mother was a widow. So he would go over to his mother and say, Mom, why don't I have a sister? She would say, yes, you have a sister. Your sister is Janaki, but she is married to Ram, who's the king of Ayodhya. And because she has very important engagements there as a queen, she's not able to come and see you. So one day Pragya Das, all of 12 years of age, decided to get up and go to Janaki and meet her. So he walked all the way to Ayodhya, and in that bedraggled state, not having eaten anything, not having decent clothes to wear, his legs, feet bleeding, he would ask around saying, Janaki kahan hai, Ram kahan hai? And people would laugh at him. So one fine day he was sleeping under a banyan tree there, and he cried his heart out saying, I've come all the way to look for my sister and she's not coming to me. And when he was crying and calling out to his sister, this voice kind of echoed in the Kanak Mahal. And Ram and Sita decided to come and give him darshan. So Ram and Sita, along with their complete retinue, came down there. And he woke up to the tinkling of the bells of the elephants and the noise of the entire retinue. He woke up and he found a royal man standing in front of him. So he asked him, he said, who are you? So Ram said, I am Sri Ram, I am the king of Ayodhya. And your sister Janaki is there in the palanquin there. He said, no, that's impossible. It can't be my sister. Because which sister, on meeting a brother for the first time, sits in a palanquin and waits for him to approach her? If she was my sister, she would have come and she would have washed my feet in tears. So hearing that, Janaki burst out in tears and ran to him and grabbed his feet and actually cried her heart out. Just that purity of heart, if you have, that is when you can get darshan of Ram. Ram is there even today. Even today, you, I, Abhinav and Vikrant, we can have darshan of Ram, but we just don't have the heart for it.
I was so moved by that particular story, and I was thinking that this is perhaps a curse of living in Kali Yuga, that none of us seem to possess that purity of heart. So Vikrant, you talked about Kurukshetra. I'm sorry, you talked about Chitrakoot, and I have been to Chitrakoot as a student because I lived in Madhya Pradesh for a few years, and that's how I know most people, as you rightly said, may not. Similarly, when it comes to Kurukshetra, most people associate it as a fictional, as a mythological place. Very few know that if you travel on the Grand Trunk Road, you do come after Karnal, you do come to a town called Kurukshetra, and where there are places associated with the Bhishma and the
entire Mahabharata war. Yeah.
The entire Mahabharata war, there's actually a place that was identified as the place where the Bhagavad Gita, Upadesh happened and all. Yes. So another site that you talked about that has blended into mythologies, so to say, not even Itihasa, is Hampi. And Hampi is a corruption of the word Pampa, which is, for the Pampa river that flowed. And if you cross the river on the other side is where you have where you have which is associated with Lord Hanuman, and that's I think about a 500 step climb. So 5. Correct.
Every step of the way.
And similarly, there is another place called the Malyavant Raghunath temple on the other side of the river, where it is said that Ram and Lakshman stayed during the monsoon months because according to the vow that he had taken, he couldn't enter any kingdom, any inhabited place. And that is another place where an Akhand part of the Ramcharitmanas takes place, and it is very, very stirring and moving. Now, some of the stories that you have included in your book, you say that is not, it's not really found in, some of the stories are not found in the main recensions of the Ramayana that we know of, whether it is, the Goswami Tulsidas or the Valmiki Ramayana or the Kamban Ramayana or the Adhyatma Ramayana. So how do you decide, or how did you decide when, because you heard these stories from the people who were there, how much of editing would you say, editorializing would you say you ended up doing, if any?
So we were very clear, Abhinav, that we wanted to include stories which are in some sense authentic. And what I mean by authentic was we wanted that reference somewhere in one of the 4, which is Tulsi Ramayana, Kamba Ramayana, Valmiki's Ramayana, and maybe Adhyatma Ramayana. So we wanted to Eknath. We wanted to ensure that there is a reference to that part. But it was also an interesting discovery. For example, the biggest surprise to us was the Lakshman Rekha, which has become a metaphor in our Indian psyche. But to our surprise, we find that it is not mentioned in any of these Ramayans which we spoke about. There is one reference in Tulsi Ramcharitmanas where Mandodari tells Shiva, Ravan, that you could not even cross the line. That's just one very small reference he uses, but there is no story about Lakshman drawing the Rekha with his bow or with his arrow before he goes to save Ram, when he hears Ram asking for help. All those stories have come about to our knowledge in the later 17th and 18th century, where the tradition of Ram Katha continued, and people, I think, for the socio-economic and the kind of the structure of Indian society then, probably wanted to show that a husband can't leave a wife in the middle and go away. He needs to protect her or something like that. So that was one story. Which the other one, which Nilesh, you can talk about your experience with Shabari, about the Shabri ne bear khaye and wo jhuta, again is not mentioned in the Ramayans.
It's not there in the mainstream Ramayans. But going back to the initial point you made, Abhinav, which is that by and large we have taken stories which were rooted in either of the Ramayans. So we would scour the Ramayans to find out whether there is the slightest reference. Maybe there's just one line mentioning that particular story, which is not explained. And we had the full story, so we put it in. But there were at least 4 or 5 stories which are so strongly rooted in the local ethos that we didn't have the heart to leave them out. So we included them. But wherever we have included stories which have not been cross-checked or which have not lived up to the verification process we had put it through, then we have mentioned that this does not find mention in any of the mainstream Ramayans, and we are just taking it because it is a very strong local myth. For instance, when Ram entered Chitrakoot, the local story is that he sent Lakshman to Manikandan, who was the king of Chitrakoot, to ask him for permission to get into Chitrakoot, to live in his area. And it is said that when he heard it, he just got up and started dancing, the king.
Yes. And Lakshman takes offense.
He doesn't understand what's happening.
Lakshman took offense because he is dancing in answer to a simple question. So he went back to Ram, and Ram told him, no, he has explained many things to you in this. By dancing, he has expressed his joy at your coming into his area. And again, by showing a childlike innocence, he has actually conveyed to you that as long as you come with a pure heart and live peacefully, I have no problems with your staying here. So he said by that process of dancing, he has actually welcomed us. Now, this story was told to us surprisingly by our driver who was taking us around. And then not thinking it may be a figment of his imagination, not wanting that, we cross-checked it with at least 3, 4, 5 sources in Chitrakoot when we were around. Wherever we would go, we would ask Manikandan ki kahani, and they would tell us the same story. So it is so strong in the local ethos that we thought it deserved to be in the book. Similar, 2, 3 other stories like this have come in. And talking about Shabari, for instance, the point Vikrant made, Shabari ke bear, so wo jhoote bear is something we are told from class 3 onwards. We read that story. Bhakti ka roop aisa hota hai ki Shabari ne jhoote bear khilaaye. But when we went there and we asked the caretaker of the Shabari temple there, said ki Shabari ne bear jhoote khaye the. He said, "Kyo? Why would she do that? ये तो यहाँ से बेर तोड़ के लाई और उसने ताजे बेर खिलाए, वो झूठे बेर क्यों खिलाएगी?" So we tried to explain to him. He said, "नहीं, मैंने आज तक कभी नहीं सुना ये बात." And we went on and checked and found that neither Ramcharitmanas nor Valmiki Ramayana says that they were tasty.
Correct.
This came into the common discourse much later. For instance, the Lakshman Rekha was actually first mentioned in the Malayalam version and also then the Telugu version of the Ramayana. But this was probably just a little before Ramcharitmanas was written. And then it went into the Bangla version. The Ramcharitmanas completely ignored those versions and went into the Adhyatmik Ramayana. For the Ramcharitmanas is actually based on the original Sanskrit Adhyatmik Ramayana, not even on Valmiki. You find many commonalities. For instance, Shiva telling Parvati, the story of Kakabhashandi and so on.
Correct.
So that's where, so he completely ignored that and went on the original story itself. So this is a much later edition, maybe only 600 years old.
Correct. And when talking about some of these differences, especially with respect to, who actually first recited the story of the Ramayana, and there you have this very fascinating, episode where you describe why crows are born half blind, and that then relates to this arrow that was shot by Lakshman because he had taken the form of a crow, and Kakabhashandi, and so which is why I think for people who are
this was Indra's son. This was not.
Oh yeah, yes. Mayank or was it Jayant?
Mayank.
Jayant. Two of them are involved there.
I see. So, which is why I said at the very beginning that this is a fascinating book to have, not only if you're reading the Ramayana to see what the legends and the stories and the itihas are associated with those places, but also if you happen to go to any of those 53 places associated with the Ramayana that you covered in your book. I think this is a fascinating companion to take. I do want to leave, for those who are on this Q&A, we will take questions. So you can send in your questions via the chat window. And once we're done with the Q&A, we'll take those questions one by one. I want to move a little further south. So after Chitrakoot, eventually you end up at Hampi. And Hampi is one of those places.
Nothing.
Correct. But eventually then you find your way to Hampi.
Correct.
Now, Hampi is a place that has multiple associations of history, and then going back to, even earlier times. Most people recognize it as the capital of the Vijayanagar Empire, but few know that it also has association with the Ramayana, and this is one of the places where, as Sita was being carried away by Ravan, and she dropped a few of her trinkets, they fell on the barren, rocks and all. So my experiences when I went to Hampi the first time, that was almost 10 years back, and it struck me that the description of the barren place and where Sugriv and Hanuman was sitting on the rocks, and then they saw this the jewelry of Sita Mata fall. I said, that is so evocative. How could someone have written about it without knowing about the place? So tell us a little bit about your experiences of Hampi, and you have this very interesting anecdote with the driver who tells you he knows Hindi, English, and all. So please, if you may.
Yes, this was a driver who understood every language on earth as long as it concerned him. But you ask him anything about the places that are related, he would say, no Hindi, no English, immediately. That was the standard response. So we had a tough time communicating to him, and he was hell-bent on ensuring that we stuck to the touristy places. And every time I would tell him, or Vikrant would tell him, let's go to Madhubani, he would say, Kyo jana hai? Nahi jana hai. We'll go to Pattanagar. We'll go to Aihole. We'll go to Badami. We don't want to go to Badami. We are going to go there separately. Why do you want us to go? Say, no, you have to go there. You can't come to this place. Nobody goes there. Why are you going there? So every time we had an argument with him. He's probably the only driver who did not appreciate our mission. I think Vikrant, we have otherwise been fortunate. Almost all the drivers, the moment we get into the car, we'll tell them we are not tourists. We are here for this job. We want to see places associated with the Ramayana. So in every single case, they would go out of the way to suggest places to us. Whole lot of places we came to know because our drivers told us, yahan mat jao, yahan ek jagah hai. And then we went there. But this was the only driver who was absolutely. And he had a good one at us. We were looking for the Hanuman idol at Madhuban. That is a single stone granite, 18-foot high idol. And we asked him, Madhuban. He said, nahi pata. We said, Hanuman. He said, Hanuman. And then he took us on a circuitous route on a hilltop, at the end of which was a temple which was about 5 feet high and all. And he said, Hanuman. He said, Bada nahi hai, chota hai. He said, that's it. I mean, come on. You never said Bada. So there we had a 4-foot Hanuman. Anyway, we put in our hands. There was a Vitthal Mandir nearby. We prayed to Lord Vitthal and said, Bhai, ye jagah dhundni hai, Bhagwan, madad karo. And just as we were folding our hands, I was praying to the Lord there. I heard Hindi being spoken very loudly in the middle of nowhere. So I turned back and said, "Koi Hindi aa rahi hai, kuch to koi to yahan pe hoga jo janta hoga." So we rushed and we found that there was a Vitthal temple site. On the side there was a small dharamshala, and there were 5 sadhus who were sitting there watching television. And that Hindi that was blaring was coming from television. So we went there and said, "Hindi bolte hain aap, bada acha hua aap bol rahe hain." So bole, humko Madhuban jana hai. So they started laughing. I said, "Why are you laughing?" He said, "Ye to baithe hai Madhuban." And the sadhu next was actually the priest of the Madhuban temple, Falahari Baba.
Amazing.
So he came down, went into the car, and within 5 minutes of this place, we were in Madhuban. It was just a 5-minute journey away, but the driver had the last laugh. He made us climb all those rocks, but we were very lucky, because had we landed up straight away in Madhuban, we wouldn't have met Falahari Baba, because he was there in the Vitthal temple at that point of time. So many such things have happened. We've had a lovely time. We met the royal family of Anagundi, who are the 18th and 19th in line from Krishnadevaraya. They also added a lot of inputs to it and found them to be very humble, very fascinating people. We interacted with them. They told us a few stories, and particularly that there were those menhirs there. There are these stones which are raised straight and another stone put on top, which established the fact that as many as 25,000 years ago, there was human habitation in Hampi. So that link is established. You don't have a direct thing that none of the menhirs says Ram came here. Obviously not. Because beyond 3 BC, we don't really have evidence like terracotta figurines or stone edicts, etc. They are not there beyond 3 BC. But the fact that there was human habitation and all the settings that are there mentioned in the Ramayana are available there. Except for one thing, which is that Ram is said to have shot his arrow killing Vali from behind a sal tree. There are no trees in Hampi. There are are only rocks. Why that is? Why? What is the discordance? We have no idea. We couldn't trace that. Many fascinating stories of Hampi.
Do you want to add anything to your Hampi experiences?
I had a interesting experience where we met one guy, and it turned out to be from my institute, IIM Bangalore, where this guy has left his job in Bangalore in an IT company and has now become a full-time priest, just taking care of the temple. And his father died and he took over that temple, and he said that, and the house in which he stays, he says, is smaller than the garage which he had in Bangalore. But, we were fascinated by the kind of devotion people have and just the sheer belief that Ram will take care of me. That makes people do some amazing stuff. And this was one very humbling experience. Of course, over the course of a journey, we have met many such people who have devoted their life studying Ramayana. As Nilesh mentioned in Tulsidas's house in Rajapur, the 12th generation, 400 years, constant recitation part, Manas का पाठ 400 साल से हो रहा है 24/7. और कोई ना कोई आके 1 घंटा 2 घंटा 4 घंटा जो है मानस पढ़ के चला जाता है. We felt that, what are we doing? We are just writing a book. Here are people just knowing Manas by heart, and those many such people we met was really humbling.
I think it's so true that when you travel to India, or when you travel to what can more accurately be described as Bharat, I think it is oftentimes a very humbling experience. The living in urban India feeds upon the ego of ourselves, that we have a car, we have an air-conditioned house to live in, and therefore it makes us better than the rest of the people who don't see that. And then when you watch, you go, you experience, you witness the incredible power of faith that drives people. And I think at that point, I can recount a couple of instances where I felt that, okay, I'm basically a speck of dirt compared to the faith that these people have. I am
amazing.
So I can only imagine over the course of your travels, this would have been such an illuminating experience also. Nilesh, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I wanted to add to the story about the IIM Bangalore friend we met in the Hanuman temple, the Hanuman Janmasthal. He's the head priest of there. Name is Panindranath. I spoke to him even day before yesterday. Now, as a corporate or as a management graduate, most of the times we are fighting our own insecurities. What will happen to my career? What if I don't meet my target? What happens if the boss gets displeased? 1,000 things, 1,000 parameters we are trying to balance. In this particular case, we asked him, I said, you are a management graduate, you had such a flourishing career. Here you are sitting in a small 2-room house. First thing he said, what do you feel? And aren't you insecure? First thing he said is, I was sitting there in Ahmedabad in a huge penthouse with a garage much larger than my current house. But there I used to come home, get drunk, and I was unhappy. I'd fight with my mother. Today I come back after puja, I sit with my mother and talk to her. I'm very, very happy and satisfied. He said, I wouldn't trade this for anything else. Second, we asked him about the insecurities, and his immediate comment was, why should I worry? The Lord called me here. The Lord is going to take care of me. Now,
Amazing.
It's a takeaway. It's so humbling. It's so humbling. He said, this is not my problem. It is the Lord's problem. He called me. It's his job to take care of me. It's not my problem to worry about what is going to happen to me. The day he wants me to go, I'll go. If he wants me to stay, I'll stay. Nobody can move me. Now, look at the faith. Look at the faith behind that. That is humbling. And this we have seen across the entire journey.
Amazing.
There must be scores of people who have said this.
Okay, so next question that I have is that, traveling within India is an experience, is an adventure in itself, but it can, for all practical purposes, if you want to go to Hampi also, it doesn't require as much planning as opposed to, say, when you went to Sri Lanka, right? So you cannot say that if we don't find something the first time, we can always go back to Sri Lanka. It's a slightly more involved experience in terms of logistics and everything. How did you go about, getting to Sri Lanka? How did you figure out that these are the things you want to go to? And then in one place, I think you're right that you asked someone that, we have heard that this is where Ravan's palace is, and the person replies, but, even if it had stood here, would it have survived 7,000 years? So tell us something about, Lanka.
Vikas, your call. Lanka is your favorite place.
So, Abhinav, one thing which really surprised us and we were very happy was that except for that driver who in Hampi, all people, the drivers especially took a lot of pride in saying that this is my place and I shall show you about, so for 10 days in Sri Lanka, we had one driver in a beautiful Mercedes big van where 6 of us were traveling. And Suresh, the driver, was extremely passionate about taking us to all the places he believed. And through our tour operator, we had explained to our tour operator the purpose of a visit. So he had planned the entire itinerary, keeping the local information in mind. So we didn't go by Google search or looking at some internet sites to tell us. We had asked the local tour operator that, look, this is, and the Ramayana Trail in Sri Lanka is a fairly popular one. I was quite actually, in a way, disappointed that in India we don't have a very organized Ramayana Trail, but in Sri Lanka they are really marketing the Ramayana Trail very, very well, and it's a very organized tour. All the places are marked, and the driver really knew where to take us. So, and of course, as we do our research, we met the local Vishwa Hindu Parishad head of Sri Lanka. And he gave us some interesting stories about Ravan.
Yes. He pointed out some places also to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
there's one more point to be made about Sri Lanka. Abhinav, if I may.
Yes, please.
Sri Lanka, which is that the original Sri Lanka was much larger than the Sri Lanka we see now.
How's
so you
that?
can take it that probably, yes, because if you see all the descriptions of distances in the Valmiki Ramayana, all of them within India are absolutely accurate. How many yojanas he says, that many yojanas it is there. But in the Valmiki Ramayana, he says that Sri Lanka is 300 yojanas long and 100 yojanas wide, which means 3,900 kilometers straight and 1,300 kilometers wide. So there is no reason to think that it was not so. And the local belief is also that 9/10 of Sri Lanka is currently underwater. So almost all the major places which are associated with the Ramayana are currently underwater. So we probably have only the symbolic places there, which are not probably the places where it should have occurred. That's one of the things that we were told by Thiruchelvam, who we contacted, the Vishwa Hindu Parishad person.
Interesting. And what about Rameshwaram? That connects essentially India, the Ramayana in India with the Ramayana as it then follows. And even there is something that, how to put this? So there is a place called Dhanushkodi there, which is about 15 kilometer drive. And thanks to the Prime Minister's visit a few years back, now there's a proper road. Otherwise, you had to go by jeep over sand and all. Yeah. But when Dhanushkodi as a town was destroyed because of the cyclone that took place, I think about more than about 60 years back, even one of the holy spots where people use, because the word Dhanushkodi itself means this is where Lord Ram broke his bow after returning, and this was also where he did puja to atone for the sin of killing, for Brahma Hatya, because he had killed Ravan. So that spot also moved from Dhanushkodi to somewhere close to the Rameshwar temple. But in your travel to Rameshwaram, anything that, because there's several, about 5-6 temples at least that are associated with the Ramayana there. Share anything interesting that you have from your travels to Rameshwaram.
First and foremost, the most of the people, if you ask them where the Ram Setu starts from, they say Dhanushkodi. That's not correct. It actually starts from a place called Setukarai. Because Dhanushkodi, Rameshwaram is an island. So is Dhanushkodi part of that island itself. So in Rama's time, there was no bridge. How would they have crossed over to that side? They had to make a bridge to cross the sea to get across to Dhanushkodi. So it started at a place called Setukarai. From Setukarai to Dhanushkodi, and from Dhanushkodi to Talaimanar. That is how the bridge was built. So it didn't start over there. One. Secondly, this oft-heard story that Ram actually, after killing Ravan, atoned for the sin. This is not there in Valmiki. He did not actually stop there. when they were going in the Pushpak Viman, Ram and only pointed out the various places in Rameshwaram to Sita Maya. And he said, यहाँ पे हमने शिवलिंग स्थापित किया था, यहाँ पे हमारी आर्मी आई थी, यहाँ पे मैंने कुआं खोदा था जहाँ से पानी मिला था. So he didn't stop there. The first stop was at Hampi. The second stop was in Allahabad for Prayagraj for darshan of Rishi Bharadwaj. And the third stop was at Nandigram, where he met Bharat. So he did not stop at Rameshwaram as per the Valmiki Ramayana. But then there are as many versions as there are Ramayana. There are different stories which are internalized on the basis of local folklore. So other Ramayans say that he stopped there. But then in this case, the Shivalinga was established at the Rameshwaram temple before he went to Sri Lanka to seek the blessings of Lord Shiva. Yes.
That is where the story of Hanuman is, that he had asked Hanuman to get the Shivaling, and while he got delayed, Ram made a Shivaling of sand, and Hanuman was very upset. So Ram said, okay, you destroy this Shivaling and then we'll use yours. And as it were, Hanuman could not just even move the sand Shivaling, and he fell. He realized the power of, after all, Ram being Vishnu. And that Shivling, but Ram said that your Shivling will be first worshipped before people worship this Shivling.
Yes.
So beautiful. Again, Abhinav, we were so lucky that in the entire Ranganath Swami temple, we are standing literally 4 of us and having a darshan without any crowd. Otherwise, that temple is hundreds of people. People push you and you can't stay for more than probably 1 or 2 minutes. We could spend half an hour literally standing there. There was no crowd at all. I just couldn't believe that.
Time did you go there? Because, every time we have gone to the Rameshwar temple, we have, I think the first time we were at the temple at 6 a.m. The second time we were at the temple at 5 a.m. The 5 a.m. there were less people, but nowhere as few as what you mentioned, that, just a handful of people. So perhaps the next time we go to Rameshwaram, we'll follow your advice.
Go with us.
Anytime. So I want to take a pause here, and I'll take a few questions that have come in from our attendees. So there is one from Gaurav Kumar who says that thank you. So thank you, Indic Book Club, for sending me this beautiful book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a travel worth reading. So thank you so much, Gaurav, for acknowledging that. And again, I would request, and I'll do this as a public service announcement. So thank you, everyone who get copies of books from Indic Book Club. When you do, please do make it a point to tweet about it, put it on Facebook, and do write a review. You don't have to write a review that is 1,000 words long. You can write a 200, 300 word review, put it up on your blog if you so want, but definitely also write and put a small review on Goodreads and Amazon, because that is the place where even if people don't make decisions on even if people decide not to buy the book from Amazon, but they buy it from elsewhere, the fact is that these reviews do serve as they help in the decision-making process. So please do that. So thank you, Gaurav. Praveen has a question. Why do we call Ramayana as mythology? Shouldn't it be history? So I think, Nilesh, you talked about it, that it is generally, it is what we would call itihasa, but thanks to our the genres and in how books are classified, that's where it falls. But it is essentially itihasa. This is what happened, and obviously anything that happened thousands of years ago, you will find different versions of it that float around. So now Gaurav has one more question. He says that in the book, the authors mentioned about a village in Uttarakhand where Lord Hanuman is not worshipped because he took a part of the mountain containing Sanjeevani to save Lakshman. How about the people of Sri Lanka? Do they have similar sentiments for Rama as he killed their king?
Vikrant, all yours.
Yeah, so we did ask this question to the VHP head as well, and to many people. One thing you find in Sri Lanka for sure is that there is the Hindus worship Ram. There is no doubt about it. But Ravan also is considered as a very intelligent and somebody who was very knowledgeable. Clearly, he's not seen as a kind of villain which might be portrayed in India to that extent. But we were surprised that he's not worshipped in Sri Lanka. There is no Ravan temple which is worshipping. Yeah, right up north. We could not go there because of the LTT problems, which even continue today. So our driver mentioned that those places, while you're okay to go, it is kind of avoidable. In fact, he also told us not to speak in Tamil because there are always these political forces at work. But yes, Ravan, I think is seen in Sri Lanka as a king, as somebody who was who made a mistake.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There was just one place. There was near the Sita Elia temple. There is a place called Sri Gayatri Pitham, which is the only place where we met a person. That is the place where Indrajit and Ravan used to pray in order to get their divine powers. That is where Indrajit actually first got his divine powers. So that is the only place where we found a slight bit of antagonism about Ram in the tone in which he was spoken about. He said, "What do you think? You think Ravan was a villain? He wasn't. He was the master of the three worlds." He was kind of very aggressive about the whole concept of Ravan being thought of as a villain by Indians. He's the person who explained a very interesting concept, Abhinav, which I think the listeners would like to would appreciate hearing about, which is that Ravan Tino Loko ke Swami the. So Tino Lok doesn't mean Swarga, Prithvi and Patal. Actually, anything north of Himalayas was probably considered Swargalok. India and Sri Lanka were Prithvi Lok, and anything geographically to the south of Sri Lanka was Patal Lok. So Tino Loko ke Swami means his power extended to the entire known universe as it was then to them. He said that is why, because there are records of Ravan's army beating Kuber's army somewhere near the foothills of the Himalayas. He said that is up to where he used to rule. That is, his power extended up to there. And Janasthan, where Shurpanakha used to rule, along with Trisiras and Khardushan. Now, Janasthan, he said, is the northernmost tip of the empire of Ravan. That is Nasik. That is up to where his direct kingdom extended. That was one of the 10 provinces of Ravan rule. And the 10 heads of Ravan again. This was explained to us there, that when he sat on his throne, he would have the 10 crowns of the 10 provinces put behind him. So if you looked at him, it seemed as if he was here and there were 10 heads on 10 sides. That is the concept of the 10 heads of Ravan, besides the other explanations which have otherwise been given. This is a novel concept which we learned only in that Lanka Tirwar temple there. So that's the only place. Otherwise, as far as worship of Ravan is concerned, I take pleasure in shocking people by saying that Ravan is actually worshipped in Noida near Delhi. Sector 56, Noida, is a place where there is a Ravan temple, because that is where that is the village in which Ravan was born. So there's a regular Ravan temple where there's a regular Ravan Aarti Subesham, and there is Prasad given out in Ravan's name. So the closest temple to Ravan is very close to Delhi.
I'm almost tempted to say, Nilesh, that perhaps Delhi is a fitting place for someone like Ravan to be mentioned, but let's not.
I would take strong objection to it. I was born and brought up in Delhi, and I'm a staunch Delhiite. I will take strong objection to it.
I would have said the Lutyens part.
Let's narrow the scope of Delhi down to, I think, Lutyens, where it's only fitting that Ravan should be worshipped. But let's leave that aside. So Anand Ghuria has a question, and he asks, are you aware of a book with a similar name in Marathi by Dr. Bhave? And the book's name is
Ramchandra Padyanvar.
Padyanvar, correct.
He was a doctor and an aviator. He surveyed the whole thing on his plane. One of the reasons, Abhinav, we wanted to have the experience for ourselves. So while we read all the Ramayans, 5 or 6, which you mentioned in great detail, but the other experiences we wanted to do it ourselves rather than get colored by. So I had heard about Dr. Bhave's book, but I did not read it before we went on our journey.
Okay. And Praveen K has a question. He says, okay, this will please you. I just bought it while listening to you. And thank you, Praveen, for sharing that. This is one of the intents behind doing these Q&As. It's to, introduce books to people, and there's nothing like, in my opinion, having the author talk about these books, because you get to know so much of context and color behind these books. So thank you. And thanks for taking the efforts to give me the motivation to do this trip. Excellent. I think the more it encourages people to go to these places associated with the Itihasa, so for example, near Bangalore, near Mandya, actually, there's a place called Pandavpur, which has associations with the Mahabharata. And people say it used to be called Bakasurpur, and till Bakasur was killed by Bhim, and then we went there and we had the most delicious jaggery there. So these are some of the things that you experience only when you can go to these places. So I wanted to thank you again, and we'll wait a few more minutes if there are any questions.
There's one more question I wanted to. Somebody had asked Abhinav that it's not mythology, it's itihas. I think he missed the first part where we clarified that while we call it mythology in certain places because of the myths which get added over a period of 5,000, 6,000 years, very clearly me and Nilesh believed, and we saw the reference of it. We would call it as proof that Ramayana existed and exists. There is no doubt about that. So it is itihas. But in certain places we use the word colloquially as myth because certain folklore, certain stories get added to it. Like even in Kamban Ramayana, not going to today's times, even Kamban has a habit of hyperbole. Where it talks about crores and crores of Vanar and lakhs of trees.
Even
Valmiki has that. So that is a hyperbole, which obviously does not mean that it's not true, but it is just that the exaggeration part is done to excite the reader to talk about it. The number of Vanars are added in Kamban Ramayana or Valmiki, then it will stretch beyond from Rameshwaram to Hampi. But so that we have to ignore that part when we are reading.
Correct, and that is, I think, part of enhancing the poetry of the book. So the use of alankars, and in this case, I think it would qualify as an Atishokti alankar, where you're using this exaggeration. But so thank you for clarifying that, and I think it should be clear that there's a factual core history behind it, and obviously, as with anything, over thousands of years, it is the right of the people who believe in it to adopt it and make it their own, and as part of that process, they will add certain facts to it that may not be in the original.
There is this lovely book called Rama, His Historicity by B.B. Lal, who was the superintending archaeologist who carried out the excavations at Ayodhya. And he is very, very clear that from 3 BCE, there is regular evidence unearthed in excavations all across India, which has figurines of Ram, Sita, and the story in it. For instance, the earliest terracotta figurine is Ravan kidnapping Sita, which is 3 BCE. So he says, across the country, you couldn't have had a similar story traversing the entire length so many years ago if it had not had an element of truth.
I want to answer one question on monkeys. Somebody had asked about monkeys, and we mentioned that in our book as well. But monkey psychology we learned only in Chitrakoot, where somebody said that all you need to do is carry a stone in your hand, but you never throw the stone at the monkey. You just show the monkey the stone, which tells him that he can get hurt. The moment you throw the stone, he knows that you no more have a weapon. And as far as you carry the stone and just show it to the monkey does not come anywhere near you, and you can carry on with your walk. We did the entire parikrama of Chitrakoot by just carrying one stone in our hand. So the amazing monkey psychology we learned at Chitrakoot. So there was another question.
Another thing about the monkeys was that, yes.
Another
thing about the monkeys was that this is not necessarily, monkeys are not necessarily only at the places which have Ram temples. We saw them in Shiva temples also.
That's right.
Correct.
So, yes. The Trikuta Parvat Shiva temple had a lot of monkeys. So monkeys, I think, are drawn by the prasad that gets in. So there are monkeys all over. They're not necessarily only at the Ram temples. Not only at the Ram temples.
Correct. And, to the book
question.
Sugriv talks by Anand Gure.
Yes. I'll answer that. Peru. Yes. The reason why Ram was directed to go to Sugriv and talk to him one of the prime reasons was that Sugriv was one of the most learned people in the field of geography of the world as it existed at that point in time. He had the maximum knowledge about geography. So it was thought that if there was anybody who could score the directions and tell people where to go to look for Sita Maiya, Sugriv was the person. So Sugriv had a lot of knowledge of geography. So if Sugriv talked about Peru, for instance, it is quite possible, quite logical, because Sugriv was essentially a geography expert, besides being a extremely learned and educated and well-read person. Again, another issue, similar thing was that there have been huge idols of Vanars, similar to Sugriv and Hanuman, which have been unearthed in excavations in Peru.
That's a fascinating connection.
You don't quite know what. There is a connection. You don't know what that connection is.
Divya Mahajan has a question. She says that thank you, authors and Indic Book Club, for sending me such a beautiful and meticulous work. Thank you, Divya, for acknowledging that. And her question is, are you planning something on the lines of Pandava Vanvas?
We selected Ramayana because there was a linear geography to from north to south, going via Panchavati to Rameshwaram and Sri Lanka. But while we are not talking about it right now, there is another fascinating journey which in India people have been doing for many, many centuries. And that's one of our projects. It's again a combination of mythology. There I use the word mythology because it is about mythology, Shiva and Parvati and others, and about travels as well as history combined. So we are hoping that next year we would have such a fascinating book out which will be as endearing and enjoyable as the Ramayana. But Mahabharata, the problem is that it goes to very different, if you look at Krishna, it goes from Dwarka to Mathura to Kurukshetra to Hastinapur, various places. So it's not a very linear geography where one could actually travel in a kind of a one direction.
And it's wonderful news to hear that you are working on a project like that, and we can expect a book next year. Vijay has a question. Any views about Hanuman not being an ape as it is popularly believed? This is Vijay Raghavan from Mumbai.
Yes, there is the Raja of Anagundi told us that there was a tribe of people living there who were not monkeys. They were literally speaking vanachar log the, jungle mein rehne wale log the. But the standard that they bore, that flag, had the emblem of a monkey on it. Therefore, they were called the monkey people. All of them may not have been monkeys. Actually, they were actually jungle people who lived in the jungle who carried a standard which had a monkey emblem on it. So they were called the monkey people. That's the story we heard there.
Okay. So in closing, you talked about the book in the historicity of Rama, written by Sri B.B. Lal, and I think the excavations that he did at Ayodhya, they were published in the Archaeological Survey of India annual book, I think in 1977, 78 or so. It's another thing that it became controversial only more than a decade later. But leaving that aside, I'd like to thank both of you, Vikrant and Nilesh, for coming on this Indic Book Club author Q&A. And much as the book is a fascinating read in its own right, it was a pleasure listening to you recount some of the incidents, the anecdotes, and your experiences in that journey. Folks, the book is called In the Footsteps of Rama, Travels with the Ramayana. It's been written by Vikrant Pandey and Nilesh Kulkarni, published by HarperCollins. It's available. Both in hardcover as well as, I think, a Kindle book version is also available, right?
Yes.
A Kindle ebook version is also available. Do buy a copy, do read it, do tell others about it, do leave a review on it, and do follow us, Indic Book Club, on Twitter at Indic Book Club and on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Indic Book Club, and you can continue the conversation there. Again, Nilesh and Vikrant, thank you so much for coming on board. The last word is yours.
When you do the journey of Ramayana, yes. If nothing else, there will be some change in you, is what I felt.
We were told this by Baba Prem Das, who was the Mahant of the Hanuman Gadi temple. When we started off, he said, "You are going on a long journey. I don't know how your book will shape up. I don't know what you will write in it. But I can assure you of one thing. After you complete the journey, something inside you would have changed. And it actually has. And we don't even know what has changed. And the change will probably continue.
Excellent. Thank you so much again. And folks, we will put this up on YouTube, the video, in a few days. Thank you again.
Thank you, Abhinav. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.